we've got a super guest for us, and rather than pass accolades along for those folks that are fortunate enough to get the New York Post down here in the Sarasota, Bradenton, Tampa area, Phil Mushnick is our special guest, and he does the radio TV column. And Phil, first of all, welcome to the west coast of Florida.
Thank you, Mr. Henderson. How are you today?
I am absolutely super, and just to give some of the folks that are not familiar with your work here in Sarasota and Bradenton, Tampa, how about a little bit of a thumbnail sketch of what your modus operandi is as you write each column for the New York Post?
I complain about everything in sight. Everything I hear, no good. I just complain.
It's a very entertaining complaint, though.
Believe it or not, for better or worse, I'm hired for my opinion and my point of view, and I try to provide it. But I got to tell you, Don and Doug, I've never sat down to watch a ball game or anything sports-related thinking, gee, I'm a critic, I got to get ready to criticize, good, bad, or in between. I've always sat down as a sports fan, first and foremost. And as things come at you, as you hear things, you watch things, as things strike you as absurd, as telecasts strike you as ill-produced and with a lack of foresight, or very good telecasts. The NBC, for instance, its Derby telecast I thought was terrific, except yesterday it made it clear for 2 hours that the big story was the odds, that they had a 20-horse field in the slop. It was going to radically alter the odds. And yet, why don't you keep the odds up then at all times in a crawl at top or at the bottom of the screen? And they told us, this is the biggest story, and now we're going to ignore it. And that's the kind of things that drives me crazy, but not as a writer, not as a critic, but just as a viewer, as a sports fan.
Well, Phil, the other thing that drove me a little bit crazy, and I sort of agree with you in that sense, and I thought Barbara did a terrific job on NBC in the morning show when she got bucked off the horse, and then, of course, they came up and re-showed that yesterday. It embarrassed her a little bit, but it was a lot of fun. But I thought that she did such a terrific job of explaining, and most of the people that are watching the Derby, in my view, are not really racing fans. I happen to work at Philadelphia Park for 10 years doing the TV over there, and so I'm pretty familiar with racing. But most of the people that watch the Kentucky Derby are not. And I just thought that she did such a terrific job, Donna, showing that what they had to do in the mud with switching these goggles 6 times, and the way they had to wipe them, and the way they had to be, and the way they had to be cautious about the fact that they couldn't get to the 6th before they got to the stretch, or they wouldn't be able to see, and also the fact that these horses have what is considered to be an inbred windshield wiper within their eyes. They're not affected by the mud. They can still see, whereas the jockeys cannot. And then when the race started, I thought they could have put a small box or something during the race at the head of the backstretch, not somewhere where you're close to the finish line, but just to show what the jockeys were doing after they spent all this time explaining to the viewer what it was, but they never did an ice flow to actually show what happened during the race.
Right. You see, I didn't get that far. What I saw was the Today Show, with the cross promotion. They were Churchill Downs, and they're going to have Al Roker, who doesn't belong on a horse because he doesn't know how to be on a horse. He's on a horse.
That's right.
And here's Donna Brothers. Now, Roker's horse starts to back up into Brothers' mount, and that spooks Brothers' mount, and she's thrown from the mount, and obviously she knew what to do. She bounced up. She was a real trooper.
Right.
What if it had been the other way? What if and I don't mean to laugh, but what if Roker had been? This is the same network that for like 2 months kept giving us the Christopher Reeves tragedy story about horses and people who shouldn't be doing certain things on horses. Here we have Al Roker on the thing, and I would hope that and NBC they dodged one here. They dodged one, but you're right. There was some great stuff there.
Oh, there were so many great stories.
You know what, Don and Doug, the image I can't get out of my head was out of the gate. The overhead shot. It's a wet. There's like a pool of water right out of the gate, and there's 20 horses coming at you, and that dismayed me. That disturbs me. That's a freak out ready to happen.
Well, that's the thing. I think that most people understand the danger. They look at racing from afar with the long shots that you see on TV, and you don't really understand the competitive nature and the danger of being not only in a 20-horse field, but just being in a normal race. But I thought that Bob Baffert did a great job early on. I'm not a pregame show watcher, to be honest with you. But in horse racing, the pregame show can give so much insight to the people that don't know about racing. And I thought Bob Baffert did a terrific job, having won 3 derbies. Now he's trying to go for 4. I think Nick Zito did even a better job trying to articulate to the fan what this muddy track actually meant as it constituted the race itself.
Gotcha. But right at the top, they provided some intriguing information.
Correct.
That this, because of the weather and because of the slop, that this race, this Derby, might provide, and very well could provide, and did provide, the longest shot favorite ever in the history of the race. 6-1 had been the previous one. I think 2 went off yesterday at 7-1 or 8-1. So that you don't have to know horse racing at that point to say, gee, this is interesting. This could be the favorite could be paying a lot of money, and they immediately ignored that story. They told us, don't lose sight of it. They closed our eyes to it.
Well, I almost thought it was a supermarket that won the race. Super Saver gets the win, but Burrell was such a...
I thought it was an Italian, heavily larded piece of salami.
Exactly. But I thought that the Fletcher and, of course, Burrell was so well advertised last year, all the difficulties he'd gone through in racing, and then to win 3 of the 4. I mean, there were so many individual stories in that particular race.
It was a great question I asked to Burrell, too. He said, you've won on this horse, on this track. Does that make a difference? And he shot the interviewer a glance. He says, absolutely. That did make a difference.
Home track for him.
Right.
Phil, Doug Miles here. Good to talk to you. Grew up in New York and enjoyed reading column when I lived up there.
You're the one.
And I'm the guy that reads it online too. I don't know if you guys like that, but I like reading it online. I do buy the paper down here though when we can get it. But
yeah, sure.
I want to ask you though. I mean, as a guy that's done radio, how much radio, sports talk, and TV do you have to kind of flip around the dial just to kind of keep up? I know you keep up with all the sports talk shows up there. What's your day like as far as keeping up what's going on in radio?
Doug, it's really nothing. People say, well, how do you watch all this stuff? I'd be watching it anyway. I'd be listening anyway. I'm in the car. I flip on the radio. And believe me, I'll go to a classical music station. I'll go to, golden oldies. I'll go to listen to the Doors. But more times than not, I find myself listening to sports radio. And there's no shortage of it these days. There's a shortage of good sports radio. I'm gratified to hear that you guys talk sports as opposed to what we now call guy talk.
Oh yeah.
Which has really just bastardized and uglified the genre, because now there are the executives, as you guys know far better than I, the executives feel that the sports audience really can only be between the ages of 21 and 40, and really that usually means 12 and 21. And they have to be desensitized and be talking about the crotch.
And closer to 12.
Times. And, and even some talented people have to adhere to those terms of engagement. And it's even the commercials up here. We have, remember Brad Benson,
do I ever remember
the Giants offensive lineman from their first
abstained from sex for 6 months, he did.
Yeah, that's much worse. His commercials now are they're vulgar.
Oh, terrible.
And I work for a newspaper that often has its vulgar moments, but this is ambush stuff. You don't know what's coming. And you're sitting in the car, and they're just vulgar, and he thinks they're clever, and I know he thinks they're clever. He must think he's very smug about them. And the message repeatedly is, how would you like to spend, I don't know, $20,000 to $100,000 with a creep?
Yeah.
And I don't think he understands it, but boy, they're just like, they're junior high school level dirty.